All right. Hello and welcome to the Draft Brothers Champions Round podcast. If you like sports and playing betting games, be sure to download the Champions Round app. Get playing and start winning. I am your host, Jeff Hasley. I'm joined by my draft brother, Dan Turner. And we are proud to have Dave Kluge and Jacob Infante join us today. Dave is the host of The Launching Pad, which was just recently nominated for the Best Football Podcast. This is for the Fantasy Sports Writers Association. So how about that? He is a longtime Bears fan and a colleague of mine at footballguys.com. And Jacob is the lead NFL draft analyst and writer for Windy City Gridiron. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
All
no, it's
right.
always a pleasure.
Excellent. If you're a Bears fan, if you are just an NFL draft fan, this show is for you. Today, we're going to talk about the Chicago Bears, the number one overall pick in the NFL draft, what they might do with that pick, what's their optimum plan of action, and how will their decision affect several other teams? Because everyone seems to be jockeying for that quarterback. Multiply that times many teams. So I think it all kind of starts with the Bears. So that's what we're going to talk about. Let's dive in. All right. First question. Let's start with you, Dave. It was announced today, and I think it was by Dov Kleiman, that Chicago does not plan on trading away Justin Fields. One, how do you feel about that decision to keep him rather than trade him? Is that kind of what you thought was going to happen, or like where were you leaning when you heard that?
Well, that's what I expected. But first of all, I'll say that Albert Breer, I saw his actual quote, and it wasn't quite the commitment to Justin Fields that Dov's tweet made it sound to be. That being said, I don't think that there's any chance Justin Fields gets traded here. I mean, I get it. It's offseason, and we need to find some way to drum up something to talk about. But any notion besides Fields being the QB1 is just asinine. I mean, he looked great last year, and there's this big push by, I think, the data guys that, try to play a lot of dynasty and then apply what they learn in dynasty fantasy football into real life football. But that's not how it works. I mean, we're looking at a guy who had to learn his second system in just as many years. And this team didn't even really play their offense until week 6. The first 5 weeks of the season were just a joke. They were running this 1920 style offense as the whole team was getting acclimated to a new system. And then we're looking at no offensive line, no pass catchers whatsoever. And he was still able to get things done with his legs. I think that he showed more than enough to be the franchise quarterback. I don't think that there's any chance that they are doing anything besides keeping Justin Fields as QB1 for next year.
I totally get that. I mean, if they decided to trade him, just imagine the treasure trove of picks that they could potentially get. Plus, if they traded the number one pick, they'd have everything. But then again, draft picks aren't everything. We've seen teams screw that up before. So I get it. I understand. So let's just say, Jacob, are they going to trade that pick? And if that's the case, any thoughts on like who might be a good trade partner for them? What's like the perfect scenario for you in that regard?
Realistically, I think the Bears will trade out of the number one overall pick. I mean, you're looking at there's going to be a surplus of teams looking to trade up for a quarterback in this year's draft, especially with the news of Tom Brady's retirement. That's one more team being added to the fray of teams who need quarterbacks. And we've seen that more often than not, the most successful long-term play, rather, is to have a young quarterback and to really develop that. Just because of the lack of names that consistently enter free agency, and we're kind of in this new age of trading for superstar quarterbacks. It didn't happen as much before, but now we're seeing more of it. So I can't say for sure really how fruitful that is. So with all that said, I think there are going to be a lot of teams looking to move up to 1, especially with the Texans there at 2. If there's a quarterback that a team really wants, I think they're going to be aggressive in moving up there. I think Indianapolis at number 4 stands out as the perfect fit for both teams, because not only does Indy move up to the number 1 spot, secure whoever their QB1 is, they don't leave it to chance that Houston takes it or someone else moves up to 3, really get their guy, jump in front of a divisional rival, and Chicago gets the chance to trade back, still be in the top 4, which realistically means you're getting one of Will Anderson or Jalen Carter on the board still. So I think that from a value perspective, that matches up perfectly for both sides. The two organizations have a lot of tie together. Ryan Poles and Chris Ballard work together in Kansas City. Obviously, Matt Eberflus used to be the Colts defensive coordinator. So, a lot of ties between the two franchises. One team, though, as a sleeper, I'll throw out the Raiders at 7. I think that's going to be a sleeper. I don't necessarily think it's going to happen, but they're looking to move on from Derek Carr. And if they throw enough draft capital, I think that the Bears would definitely consider it.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's the best case scenario for them that you mentioned, possibly getting Will Anderson maybe with that 4th pick, and they already have Fields. It's kind of like solving their issues that they need. Dan, I got a question for you, man.
Yeah.
Do you think that the quarterbacks in this draft are worthy enough to trade up for the number 1 pick?
I think Young probably is, I think really what it really is based on what each franchise thinks. Honestly, I mean, there have been plenty of times before where a player might not be skill wise worthy of whatever pick they landed on, but if a franchise wants that position enough, they're going to trade for him regardless. Is anyone in this class at the level of like a Burrow when he came out or something like that? Probably not. I wouldn't think so, in my opinion. But it really only takes one franchise to go up there and love C.J. Stroud or Young or Levis or whoever enough to go up there. So I think that's really what it is.
Yeah, and they have an owner or a GM who says, you know what, whatever it takes, let's get it, let's do it, let's get it done, let's get that spot. Interesting. Jacob, a little bit later, I want to talk to you about the players, the quarterbacks, and who you like. But Dave, question for you: if they did not move out of that 1st pick, who would you prefer them to take?
I mean, it seems like Jalen Carter is a great fit for this defense. I mean, that's exactly what they need, is that 3-tech guy in this defense. But I don't think that there's any chance that they hold on to that 101. And there's just really no point to. Jacob already laid out everything perfectly, so I'm not going to sit here and go over what he already went through. But right now, if you look at the top 9, there are 7 quarterback needy teams in that top 9. And, regardless of what the consensus rankings are on these quarterbacks, Dan already alluded to it. All you need is one team to fall in love with one prospect, and you get a haul. Like we saw San Francisco move up for Trey Lance, like we saw the Bears trade up for Mitch Trubisky in 2017. That's all it takes, is one general manager to fall in love with one quarterback. I don't think that there's any chance they're drafting from 101 this year. But if they absolutely had to, for whatever reason, all of these quarterbacks just fall off a cliff between now and the combine, now in the draft, I think they end up going with Carter.
All right. Yeah, I mean, shoot, you can't go wrong with him or Will Anderson. Both of them are good picks there. All right, so I do want to talk about these quarterbacks because there's people out there who are like, I know the names. I don't really know much about them, or, explain to us. And I'll start with you here, Jacob. You're my draft guy here in this scenario. How do you rank the top 4 quarterbacks, if you want to include 4 in this draft? And how many do you think are going to be 1st-round picks?
So I think you're looking at 4 quarterbacks going in the 1st round. And I have it ranked as Bryce Young is my QB1, CJ Stroud is number 2, Will Levis is number 3, and then Anthony Richardson at number 4. And I think those are the 4 guys that you're going to look at as round 1 targets. I think Hendon Hooker out of Tennessee might have been in the conversation if he didn't get hurt, but I think that'll drop him a bit. But those 4 guys, I think, will go round 1. Bryce Young's my top guy. He's proven time and time again at the collegiate level that he has all the intangibles and the tools needed to succeed. The arm elasticity, the athleticism, the deep ball accuracy. I think, the size is a concern, and the durability I'm a little bit worried about. And, like Dan said, I don't think there's a Burrow type prospect, a Lawrence type prospect, at that level. But I'm giving Bryce Young the narrow edge over Stroud. I think it comes down to, I think Young's a bit more creative out of structure. And I think Stroud has the potential to be really good outside of structure. And we saw it in the last game he played against Georgia. But I just want to see a little bit more of that. But you keep in mind, Stroud has better size. I'd say there's more velocity behind his ball than there is with Young. And then you get to the 2 wild cards. I mean, a lot of people I shouldn't say a lot of people, but some people have Will Levis as QB1, and I'm not on board with that, just to be honest. I mean, I get why some people like him. You know, he's big, he's tough, he has a big arm and all that. But given his inconsistencies at Kentucky, just his from a decision-making perspective, from an accuracy perspective, even when he had a better offensive line in 2021, there were some, ups and downs with him. I'd rather take a shot on Anthony Richardson later in round 1 than Will Levis in the top 10. Just because Richardson's younger, he's more athletic, he's bigger. Don't know who has the bigger arm between the two. I think that's a debate that you can really get into. But I think Levis and Richardson are both your toolsy kind of developmental prospects. But if I have to take a shot on either of them, which for the record, I probably wouldn't tie my hopes and dreams as an NFL GM to either of those two. But if I had to, gun to my head, I'd take Richardson a little bit later over Levis.
Wow, that's really good response. I was going to kind of go off script a little bit and ask you a different question, but you kind of covered it already, which is great. So kudos to you on that end. It was more about Levis because we see his numbers at Kentucky and they're not great, but yet here he is as a top 10 potential quarterback. And my question is why? Why? Is it? I mean, you mentioned he's got some accuracy issues, but he's got a strong arm. Are we completely throwing that into the fact that he's got a strong arm? Is this like Jeff
Zach
George, all over again? Zach Wilson, yeah. I was going further back, but like why Will Levis? If you can expand on that, maybe for another 20 seconds.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I have a tendency to ramble, so I apologize.
No, it's good.
Too much. But yeah, no, I think Levis, you're looking at a guy with a big arm. He's got an NFL caliber frame from a size and a weight and a muscular perspective. I think he's a better athlete than a lot of people give him credit for. I think he's an above average escape artist at the quarterback position. And the toughness, the hits that he took at Kentucky, the ability to get back up and to keep fighting, it's all about flashes with him. And, this year he didn't have a great supporting cast, but it's a matter of what he could do at the next level. A lot of people are projecting him to be better. I still have concerns, but it's heavily over upside with him.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, the combine, I think, is going to say a lot. Hopefully these guys will test out in the areas that we want to see him in. But all right, let's move on to the last question that I have for you guys here. And either one of you guys can answer this, but just looking at the first couple picks, Chicago, Houston, Arizona, Indy, Seattle, Detroit, you mentioned the Raiders, then you have Atlanta, Carolina, and then Philadelphia to round out the top 10. How great is that for Philadelphia? Dan?
I love it. I'm not complaining.
I know. What do you think is going to happen here? Who do you think is going to get quarterbacks? Is there going to be some trades moving up? You already mentioned the Raiders. Could Carolina, Atlanta, could they potentially move up and trade with Arizona? Arizona doesn't even have their ducks in a row yet. All they have is a GM. Their new GM, he's Montfort, I think is his name. It's escaping me. But just kind of your thoughts on what's going to happen here with the first couple picks and how that could all pan out.
I mean, my prediction is that a lot of the teams that you see right now in the draft order are not going to look the same come draft night. I think there's going to be a ton of movement atop the draft right now. Like I said earlier, 7 of the top 9 teams need quarterbacks. Every team besides Chicago and Arizona is going to be fighting for a quarterback, and that's why I agree with what you said about Levis and Richardson. But we see it every single draft season where quarterbacks that have our developmental guys that could get better, get pushed up draft boards as we get closer and closer to the draft. So it wouldn't shock me if, all 4 of those guys end up going in the top 6 along with Carter and Anderson. But I think it's probably too early to speculate exactly on who is going to pick who right now. I think the one thing that we can all kind of agree on is that there's probably going to be a lot of movement atop the draft before it happens.
Yep. And it could be, like you mentioned, the Raiders. It could be Carolina moving up. Could be Atlanta. Yeah, I don't think Ritter's not their answer, I don't think. And Carolina, who knows what their situation is going to be, but I think they're targeting a quarterback.
Could be Detroit.
You think? I mean, they liked Goff. They like what Goff did.
I mean, they said he wasn't a bridge quarterback, but I don't know if they look at Jared Goff as the type of guy that can push him really over the edge. If they don't have to give up a ton and they could move up a couple spots to get Richardson or Levis, you might see something like that happen.
I mean, we won't say it won't happen, right? It's possible. And then there's also the Bucks, the Saints. I mean, these are teams. The Saints, what are they? The 30th overall pick, I think, because they had it from San Francisco. But yeah, I mean, there's other teams that aren't even in the top 10 to even, produce any kind of draft capital, but you never know. San Francisco was 13th when they moved up for Lance, I think, something like that. Anyway, any other thoughts on how the draft unfolds, at least the first couple picks? Dan?
I agree with what Dave said. I think it's going to be a lot of, movement around, depending on where the quarterbacks go. Some people in the mid-teens go into like the 8, 9, 10 spot where draft capital given up isn't maybe as high as the top 5 picks, but definitely towards the back end if someone drops in. If all these guys go up to get a quarterback, there's going to be some really talented players like a Carter or Anderson that they maybe fall into like the 4, 5, 6 range, and you're going to have teams that are going to want a chance at those guys as well. So that's something that to consider. Once the top quarterbacks are gone, who's going to be left and who's going to go up for those guys. This is more on the spot thing because both of you guys agree that Chicago isn't going to stay at the one spot. So let's say, for example, they trade with India at 104. What's the minimum draft or the minimum that you would like the haul? Right. Thank you. You would want Chicago to get back in return to make that trade.
Jacob, you want to take this one first?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I'd say moving from 1 to 4, I think the baseline revolves around Indy's second round pick this year and their first round pick next year. I think from a value perspective, it makes sense to try and add the second round pick next year. If not, then, some sort of day 2 compensation in addition to that. It's a respectable haul, without a doubt. And I think that when you're moving, down from the number 1 overall pick, you're going to get a lot of, draft capital. And especially given it's for a quarterback, I think the value is going to inflate itself a little bit. So I'd say yes to a future first and 2 seconds. That's what I do. Whether they get that much, I'm not 100% sure. Maybe it's like a third and a fifth or something instead. I don't know. But I think at the very least, you're looking around a package that has to include the second this year and a future first.
Let me throw one out there, Jacob, and this might be a little bit too heavy, but what if we can get 436 and Michael Pittman? I know Michael Pittman and Chase Claypool have similar skill sets, so might not be the best guy to go out and get, but I think that he's immediately the wide receiver 1. I'd personally love that haul if we could pull it off.
That's spicy. I like that, Dave.
We're all about the spicy.
Yeah.
Getting a Pittman in there would be fantastic.
And I think that that's something that I would love to see. I mean, we saw it last year with A.J. Brown getting moved on draft day and Tyreek Hill right before the draft. And looking at a lot of these guys who are on their rookie deals that are coming to an end, that's when you see teams try to move off before they have to give them that big payday. So, Brandon Ayuk, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, there's a lot of guys out there that I hope the Bears are going to be targeting around the draft with that pick.
Yep, a receiver is always a need, it seems, with Chicago, and they could. Who knows? Maybe they could get one of those in return. I mean, shoot, they've got the leverage, right? All right. Well, thanks again. We appreciate your support for tuning in. Please do us a favor if you like the show, give us a like, subscribe, comment, all the good stuff that helps us crush the algorithm. And stay tuned next week when we discuss the Texans and Colts, what their plans are as we continue our preparation for the NFL draft. For Dan, Jacob, and Dave, I am Jeff Hasley, and we will see you next week.